What's cooler than that?
Silas Jackson, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm a regular now.
Yeah, unfortunately. Are you paying us for this?
I think I have like forwarded payments. They're coming.
Oh,
yeah.
We're taking it on faith.
We're taking it on faith.
Faith-based payments.
Faith-based payments.
So this is episode 2, but really probably like 4 or 5 for you.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So before we started filming, we were talking about work-life balance. If I was going to be honest, yeah, what does work-life balance mean to me personally? Oh, man. I don't know.
It's tricky, isn't it? It's kind of tricky to figure out.
Yeah, well, what does it mean? Work-life balance. Right now, my life is kind of my work. So how do you... It's like, it's not work or life balance. It's just life.
Yes.
This is my life.
I like how you said that, because to me, when people say work-life balance, they mean I want an acceptable amount of work and an acceptable amount of life. And they separate those two concepts as if they're not interrelated. And I understand why. Because a lot of people work jobs and they work them solely to keep a roof over their head and so that they can afford to do enough fun stuff to dull the pain of that work. Which means they are working only so that they can not do that as much as possible. Now think about that. When you think about that, it's not something that you would ever expect to be conducive to a life that is fulfilling and meaningful.
Right.
And so I use this analogy, or metaphor rather, of you look at an ant. We'll just use an ant for an example, right? When an ant is going about his business, right, it's not thinking about clocking in or clocking out. And you'll forgive the example of, the insight into the perspective of an ant in working. But it's just doing what it's meant to do, and it's living its life. Mm-hmm. And so when you live a life that's aligned with your purpose, the line between work and life is gone, and it's just one thing.
Right. Right.
And that's the thing, is you need to have a mission, and then you need to have work that aligns and contributes toward that mission. And then the distinction between work and play, or rather work and life, isn't as obvious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say mostly people who ask that question all the time, how do I find work-life balance, is because they're in a situation where they hate their work. Mm-hmm. And life is kind of the escape from the decisions that you have made that led you to just working like a slave at a job that you don't like. Mm-hmm. So you have to get out of it. So you want to try to find some balance, and you want to shift the weight of the burden of your just boring, miserable life. You want to get that leaning more towards the side of your fun, whatever. You go drink, you bowl, you golf.
Yeah.
All your...
Yeah.
But everybody, that's kind of where it gets weird though too, because everybody can't have their passion job, can they? Is that even possible? We can't all have the dream job that we like.
No.
Somebody's gonna hate their job, right?
No. I do think that there's room, and I want to explain this carefully, but I do think there's room for people who have to work occupations that they don't necessarily enjoy. And the reason for that is you have to view life on a longer time span and with a greater distance perspective. And so you have to see that the things you're going through for a reason. If it's going to be suffering, then you've got to have something to justify it. It's like, why do I have to do this? Is there a reason for it? Or am I just suffering needlessly? And so when I was working jobs that I didn't necessarily enjoy, I knew that I was doing that so I could afford myself the opportunity to actually invest in the things that I wanted to do. And so there was a reason why I was there.
Right, but you had a plan.
You got to have a plan, right?
They don't.
You got to have a plan.
So what do you say
though.
to someone who doesn't have a plan?
Get a plan.
Right?
Right. Well, and it's like, it can be a bad plan, I think.
Yeah.
Because you just got to...
What should the plan be? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you're a guy working at Wendy's in the drive-thru.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a plan. You hate your life. You play video games, right? That's your work-life balance. You balance it all out by playing video games and whatever else to keep you happy. Mm-hmm. You have no ambitions, right? You don't want to be a doctor. You don't want to be a lawyer. You don't want to be in real estate. You don't really care about having tons of money, but you hate where you're at. Mm-hmm. What should be your plan?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is something I heard a while ago, and I like to use it quite often, which is you want to focus on being directionally correct and not absolutely correct. So to give you an analogy with this, the guy at Wendy's, if you know that where you're at is not where you want to be, then you can look at it like a continuum. Other than where I am is better if it's not where I really hate being. So what you do is you just move away from that, away from Wendy's. Like if you're lost in a forest, right? You don't try and figure out where you're at from where you're standing. You have to start moving, even if you don't know where you're going. But then you stumble upon a river and then you're like, okay, well, this must go to the shoreline. And then you start figuring things out from there. And, oh, ivy only grows on this side of the tree. And so now I have some directions figured out. So you don't stand there in the middle of the forest lost and try and figure it out without moving.
Right.
You have to start moving. And so be directionally correct to be like, well, if I don't know what I want to do, but I know I don't want to do this, then I need to do something else. And then yes.
But I don't have motivation to do anything else.
You don't have motivation.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're using the Wendy's guy.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't have any motivation. Hate where I'm at. Mm-hmm. My point to bringing up such it's like you can't win in this scenario, right, with this individual. My point for bringing that up is because we're talking about work-life balance. Mm-hmm. It's like that argument does exist for some people simply because they're unwilling to try to go out of the forest. Like we're talking about, they're unwilling to look around. Mm-hmm. They are just going to stay where they're at and complain about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So in work-life balance, for people like you or I, who have a direction and we have the motivation and the discipline, you know, that this conversation would be more for us, right? Mm-hmm. For the guy who's at Wendy's who doesn't have, he
doesn't have anything.
Yeah, you're not going to get anything out of this conversation.
Sure.
You know?
Well, maybe not. But I see what you're saying because you asked about motivation.
Right.
So there's, like, I believe in acceptance to start. When you start anything, you have to accept whatever's true about it. And so when you look at your own circumstances, a person like that who says, well, I hate where I'm at, but I'm not motivated and I refuse to do anything to change it. All right, you can say that and that can be the end of the story. I'm like, wow, that's a sad story. That's it. That's what I'll say to you.
Yeah.
If you refuse to do anything about it, then that's you. And that's sad. But there's nothing I can do to create a life for you. That's on you.
It's true.
That's on you. Now, I want to point out something about motivation that I learned recently. Someone defined it operationally, and I thought it was very useful. And he said, motivation is the equal opposite of deprivation. And so whatever you feel in your mind or your body that you are most deprived of is the thing that you will be equally most motivated to pursue. And so when you're more hungry than tired, then you'll pursue food before you pursue sleep.
You'll be motivated to get food.
Right, exactly. And so a lot of the issue is when people aren't motivated to change their circumstances, it means that they don't have enough deprivation in their mentality. They aren't really desperate enough. Their circumstance isn't dire enough for them to need to change, right? And so one way you can do that is with your reference group. So we often hear people say that, like, you are most like the 4 people that you spend the most time with, right?
Sure.
It's not necessarily that.
Yeah, I personally disagree with that statement.
I disagree with that as well. No, it's more like the people that you most often compare yourself to are the people that you're more likely to emulate. And so what you can do is change your reference group. Now, a lot of people that are in these depressed situations where they're unhappy with their lives and their circumstances have friends that are in the same circumstance. And so if that's your reference group, then you're not doing too bad. So you need to change your reference group.
Right. I'm doing okay with this group of Wendy's employees.
Right. It's like, yeah, we're all, like...
We all suck.
And you get some camaraderie and complaining about it and being able to vent and to feel pity and share your bitterness.
Yeah.
Right? And that could be fun, actually. And so a lot of people are content with that. And what content means is, like, I'll settle for this. It doesn't mean that you like it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so if you are settling for it, then by definition, it means you are content. Regardless of what you say.
Interesting. That's a scary place to be at. If you have no plan and no drive and no motivation or whatever. Motivation is comes and goes, right?
I kind of hate the word, but yeah.
I know it's
become
like,
so
I don't
cheesy
have any
almost.
motivation. I agree that the phrase should be I don't have the discipline. Right? You can be motivated today and not motivated tomorrow, but still have the discipline to go and perform a certain action, right? Regardless of your motivation. It's great if you have motivation. I always have a way better workout when I'm motivated to do so because I've got some guy screaming in my ear saying, "You're weak." Andrew Tate, Jocko Willing, David Goggins, whoever else it might be. I always feel like I have a much better workout that way, but also if you have the discipline to do something like that, if you have the discipline to go and work out, the discipline to maintain your finances, also something I want to talk about before we quickly, because this is going to be a long, if you have the discipline to do all of those things, you're going to feel, right, regardless of motivation, if you have the discipline, at the end of the day, you're going to feel so very well accomplished and proud of your life and like the work-life balance thing that everybody wants to find, right? You're going to have that feeling. If you can say it's a feeling, I have work-life balance, right? You're going to feel the reward in your life if you just have discipline, right? If you only have motivation,
you don't have consistency.
Right. Discipline is the one thing that will maintain that level of excellence in your life, right? Discipline can survive without motivation. Motivation will not work without discipline, right? Or it's very fleeting and it's
unreliable.
It's super unreliable.
Yeah, it's unreliable.
The original question was work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like you have work-life balance?
I feel very much that the work and the labor that I am practicing and pursuing relates very, very closely, if not directly, to the goals and ambitions that I have for my life ultimately. And so I see it as a part of my life.
Right.
And so it's all one thing to me.
You have a life.
I have a life. Right. And
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like when people talk about being extreme, it's like a person that is extremely healthy, like you could say, do they have a balanced diet?
Yeah.
When you talk about a balanced diet, right? In terms of what would facilitate a healthy body and mind, it would be full of nutritious foods and there would be no junk food. Right? And so they would say, well, there's no junk food. So you're not including all the foods. Like, that's not very balanced. And I'll say, no, it's extremely healthy, but it's a balanced diet.
Right.
And so sometimes what is healthy is extreme in one sense, but balanced in another. And it excludes things that are unhelpful or antithetical to that goal. And so when you cut out things that ordinary people use to, and I'm just going to say this, like distract and dull their attention so that they don't have to think about their problems, then that comes off as unbalanced. But the goal is to have a life that you don't want to be distracted from. You want to have a life that you want to be focused on.
Right. Everyone should be able to find that, I would think.
I think
you would
really
think, right? There's got to be some place for everyone to be at in life that makes them happy. It's interesting to meet people who are just super depressed and super hateful about everything.
I notice
nothing, you know?
Those people are very much, their story is about what happened to them. And the story of a winner is about what they made happen.
Sure.
And so you can tell the bent people have by the way they talk about their life. And they say, well, this happened to me and that happened to me. If I were to describe my life, it would be a series of I did this and I did this and I pulled that off somehow. And I made it through this and I made it through this. And I still did this, even though this, and this happened. Right?
Right.
That's the kind of story you want to have. These people, when they say these things, though, it is an excuse, right? It's like, okay, so you're not gonna make it. Like, just end the discussion there.
Somebody's got to flip the burgers.
I mean, that's like when you look at that, it's like people, they want it to be okay when they tell you their sad story.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there aren't sad stories, right? But the thing is, it doesn't change anything.
Sure. Yeah, that's scary, man. It's scary to meet somebody like that because it depresses me. Mm-hmm. You know?
They almost can't be reasoned with.
Yeah, and I almost shouldn't even say it depresses me. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's curious and it's sad. Mm-hmm. You know, to see someone, especially to see someone fall into a place like that, self-deprecating, blaming everybody, not taking any accountability for their actions or their life. Mm-hmm. It's sad to see someone like that, especially if you look at that person and you see the potential in them.
Oh, man.
That's what's extremely sad to watch, right? I know plenty of people like that where I look up to them and I'm like, if you would just go and look in the mirror and see what the hell that I see, right? And straighten your shoulders up, get your shit together and get back on the horse instead of whatever it is that you're doing right now. I see you being great and you can't see it. And that's frustrating and sad. And it's such a hopeless situation. And I don't know how to make someone see the potential in them. And it's also this weird thing where it's like, if I see the potential in a certain individual, does that mean they have the potential or does that mean that I see it? Is that just my own
is that your imagination?
Perception of this person, right? Do they maybe not have it? And I just, right? It's like, I don't know where that one falls either.
On that note, particularly, I would say almost no one has achieved everything they are capable of.
Sure.
And so everyone has potential. And so the question is whether or not you're right about the particular potential you think they have. But I've met lots of people where I was like, I could tell as soon as I met them, I was like, you have all the natural gifts that I wish I had.
Yeah, you'd be
But
great.
I'm better than you because you won't do the work.
You won't do it.
And I was like, and I wish you would. And I wish you would.
Yeah, you'd be a force to be reckoned with, too.
Well, that's the thing,
But
is
you
a
just
force.
don't. You won't do it.
A force is such an interesting idea because when you think about a force, it's like gravity always applies. Even if you're flying, it still applies. You still have to abide by the laws of gravity. And so that's why I like to think about discipline as a force, because it forces you. And it means that you can't be stopped. That's what that means.
Right.
And when you have such discipline and you have those habits in you, like there are things that I do on a regular basis that are like difficult and annoying. And I sit there before I do them, agonizing over the amount of discomfort I'm going to be put through. And I know I'm going to go do it. And that's what's annoying to me is I know I'm going to get up and go do it. And I'm like, I know I am, no matter how painful it is. And that is a force.
Right.
It can't be stopped.
Right.
That's what you need.
It's true. That's true. And that's actually going to be one of the questions that I ask you later on. It's going to tie back into that. I did want to talk about, I mean, this is something we discussed a while ago. So people who, I'll put this question this way. I know several people who have problems managing their finances. And they can't budget. You know, they can't dig themselves out of holes. They don't have any financial self-restraint. They don't have, it's tricky dealing with money when you tie up your earthly possessions and your self-worth. You know, it's like, I am as valuable as the things that I have. I'm as valuable as the amount of things I can purchase. I'm as valuable as my outward appearance at any given time, right? That's all of my self-worth is tied up in that. I don't have any inner feelings of
No intrinsic worth.
nothing, right? Or maybe you do, maybe it's just not enough to overcome your bad, poor spending habits, or your whatever, not willing to face reality that you're not making enough money to support this kind of a lifestyle, right? So for these couple of dudes that I know, a couple of friends of mine, would you have any tips? Because you have, over the years, shown and proven yourself to have great financial discipline. Right? Would you say that?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good at getting what I need and not anything more than that, you know?
How do you use an app to budget?
I do use an app to keep track of it, actually. Yes, which is quite useful.
Explain a budget to someone who's 2 years old. Okay?
Okay. So basically,
You get a paycheck.
Right? We'll start with a paycheck. I love it.
Start with a check.
Right. So what the budget, and hopefully you have this before you even get the paycheck.
Let's use numbers too.
Yes,
I want to
use
be
numbers.
in detail, right? And let's
Yes.
use a nice even number.
$1,000.
$1,000, right? And you have zero money in your bank account.
Right.
You get a check for $1,000. That $1,000 is now in your bank account.
Perfect.
What do we do from there?
Okay. So here's how I start, right? With a budget, the idea is you have a plan for all the money each time you get it. So you're not guessing about anything. There's a plan for every dollar, right? Now, whatever that is, it has to be tailored to your priorities and your income. But say I get $1,000, right? So the first thing that has to happen is you spend money on things that you have to spend it on, things you need: housing, food, clothes, shelter, right? All that good stuff.
Right.
That gets taken up first, right? Bills. Okay.
Not candy.
Not candy.
Not
right?
candles.
Right.
See, people underestimate too what they actually need, right?
Right. That's another thing.
An air freshener is not one of your bills that you need to pay.
No, it's not. No, literally, like, I won't go into too much detail, but the way that I define the word need when I go to the grocery store is if I
Life-sustaining.
don't get this, I will die. That's what need means to me. I will physically die without this.
Right.
All right. And there may be a little bit of room above that.
Sure.
So that's how you define need. Now, you may not be in such desperate straits, right? But when you need and things are tight, then that's the kind of mentality you have to take.
Right.
So things you need. And then, because life is difficult and bad things happen, you have to be ready for that. So whatever's left, most of that needs to get saved, if not all of it. Now, if you have room and you can responsibly have a little bit extra, so say I put half of that, $5,000 or $500 towards necessities.
Yeah.
Absolute living necessities, right? Everyone needs these things. And then I take $450 and I put it in savings because maybe the next paycheck is going to be less, or I don't know when it's coming, or I've got laid off, right? You got to be ready for those things. And now you have $50, right? And this is the money. Now, here's the thing. There's necessities, there's savings, and then there's investing, and then there's fun money. Fun money is always at the bottom.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So say you say, you know what? I'm going to take 40 of these $50 that I have left, and it's going to go in my 401k or something like that, right? Even just a small contribution like that.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, right?
Yeah.
Now you have $10. Okay.
That's your fun money.
That's your fun money.
And that's the reality of the situation.
Yes.
Right? And a good way for someone who, like I brought up an app, right? Like a budget app. Okay, so I said explain it like a 2-year-old, right? So some of those budget apps, if you don't know what the hell you're doing, you'll still get confused. I don't know how, but people will.
Yeah.
So I would suggest you get a sheet of paper just like this, right? You write down $1,000. Okay? You write down underneath that $1,000, you write down minus rent. You put the number minus electricity, minus maybe gas, right? Insurance. You deduct all of that from the 1,000. Get yourself a calculator. When all of your life-sustaining bills are written out on this sheet of paper, and you subtract all that from the 1,000, you write that number down there, right? Simple addition and subtraction will do.
Yep.
Okay? You write that number down on the piece of paper. Okay, let's say you have 200 left at the end of this, because life is pricey these days.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That $200 is all you have. There's no credit cards, right? If you're this broke, right? If we're using this example,
right, and
you actually want to budget, okay? We're not throwing in on this $1,000 that, I also have a credit card with a $5,000 limit on it, okay? That doesn't exist.
No.
Okay? If you're trying to genuinely budget, you're working with your paycheck, okay? That $200 you have left over, like he said, take that $200. Most of it should go in savings. Okay? There's an account, right? If you log into your banking system, there's checking, there's savings, there's, and you can talk to your bank, call them, say, what's the best account to put this in? Sometimes they have special, a bank's a horrible, but if I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, right? You don't want to, you're not going to make money in a bank, right? No. But if you're just going to throw it in savings, go ahead and put it in your savings account in the bank, right? If you don't want to get into investing and whatever else, right? So that's how you budget. And if you have $5 left over for fun money, that's what you have. Now, there's 2 ways that you can increase that number. Okay?
Yep.
Get a raise at work, or you can start taking some of that $200 that you have left over, and you can educate yourself on how to properly invest it so that that money can start to make you more money, right?
Right.
There's a few ways to increase those numbers, right?
One thing I would recommend, because it's hard to invest, and a lot of successful investors are full-time investors. So if you're not going to be a full-time investor, like where you're constantly monitoring different variables and you're day trading or whatever, here's a simple thing I do is if you're going to save the money anyway, put it into a high interest account, right? And there's accounts like that, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're usually they're not necessarily at your banking institution of choice. It might be in PayPal, a PayPal savings account.
Sure.
Tends to have a higher APY on it, annual percentage yield, the amount of interest you make in terms of a percentage on the balance of the account.
Right.
Right. And so if you're going to save it anyway, and it's just going to be sitting in an account, put it in an account that makes the most interest, and then make $300 a year. Because what's that going to hurt you? Yeah.
And Google it. We're talking to a 2-year-old here.
Right.
Google it. Say, what form of account can I put my money into? What form of a savings account or whatever can I put my money to in the year 2024 that's going to make me the most interest at the end of a year?
Right.
Google it. Look it up. Type it in on YouTube, right? People out there are going to give you the answers. It's not too hard to find.
No.
But The hardest part for an individual in this situation is going to be looking at that number, that fun number, where they want to say, and usually what they do is the $200 is my fun number, right? None of that's going in savings. Not only is the $200 the fun number, also the $5,000 credit card I have is fun number, right? So I have $5,200 for fun at the end of this, and my check is only $1,000, right?
Right.
That's a dangerous road you're traveling down, and it leads in disaster. Okay, you have to live in reality. That's also the key to budgeting. You have to live in reality. You want more money? Get a better job. Learn how to invest your money. Okay, that's it.
You got to increase your income, or you got to budget differently. And this is the thing too. A lot of these individuals that struggle with this, they have their priorities misaligned and disorganized. And so if it becomes more important to you to have fun, and just think about how much fun you can have for $200. Nothing fantastic.
No.
But say it is more important to you than having a safety net and being able to take care of yourself.
Right.
And not being dependent on others in every emergency. Then your priorities are wrong. Now, I can't fix that with a budget. I can write you the budget, and you won't abide by it because your priorities are misplaced. And so one thing you need to do is you need to take a look at yourself and really consider about whether or not what you're prioritizing is what is actually important. And if it's important to you that you have no ability to maintain yourself as an independent, responsible adult, then you should question that.
Right. And something I've been doing lately that helps me, well, I've done it my whole life, but look in the mirror. Now, imagine that person, 20 years from now, that person 30 years from now, whatever it may be. Look in the mirror at your physical form, add the gray hair, the wrinkles, all the nonsense of life, right? And say, that person is tired. You look in the mirror and see a version of yourself, and is that version of yourself smiling and happy and successful, or are they tired, angry, depressed, and pissed off because the version of you that's looking at them in the mirror right now was too lazy to do the work right now to get them? That version of you in the future, he doesn't want to keep doing this. He's over it. He wants to be on a beach. He wants to chill. He wants to enjoy his last few years of his life. He doesn't want to be in the same place because the version of you that you are right now was too lazy to do a little bit of the work to set that person up. That's you in the future, right? Go look in the mirror and envision that guy. He still gets up for work every day. He's got a boss that tells him, you're going here tomorrow at this time, right? And he has to go because he has bills, because you bought a sports car when you were 30 and you never paid it off. You just kept making these little, you wanted to have fun. Look at yourself and envision yourself in the future and tell that person, explain to them why you did it. If that's not enough motivation for you to change what you're doing right now, I can't help you. You don't care. That's plain and simple.
Right.
If you're not willing to help yourself.
Yeah. No, one thing I notice about scenarios like that where people's priorities are out of order, it's usually symptomatic of the way that they value other people's opinion of themselves more than they value what they actually are. Right. So I have this thing that I like to say, which is that sometimes the hardest part about winning is giving up the appearance of winning.
Right.
And that's tricky. That's tricky
true.
to not look like you're winning, right? You don't get to have the fancy bag, right? And the vehicle, right? And the clothes, right? But you're actually financially secure.
Right.
And so you're actually better off than the guy who looks like he has everything.
It's true.
But you don't appear that way.
That's a pride issue.
That's a pride issue. And it's an issue of you needing the external validation, right? You need other people to see that. It's like, yeah, I've got stuff. I got my thing together. And you want to appear as if you've done the things that you have actively discarded by appearing like you've done them.
Right. So we live in reality, right? It's something human beings struggle with, caring about what other people think about them, right? Mm-hmm. It's very hard because the interactions that you have with individuals are so short, and so it's like I drive by this person and they look at me. Mm-hmm. I walk by this person and they look at me. That's all I got. And they judge me based on that, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm not driving by them looking my best, feeling my best, and trying to present my best, I feel like everybody's looking down on me. Mm-hmm. And people can't handle that mentally. So what would you say to someone to encourage them to be okay with someone looking at you like you're a bum? You know, yeah, maybe I have $100,000 in my bank account, but I'm driving this. Mm-hmm. And you look down on me because of it. Or my clothes are not the latest and greatest, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll look down on me for that. And mentally, I have to get over that where I don't care anymore. How would you encourage someone or help them to get to the place where they don't care what other people think anymore?
That's a great question. So one way I would think about that is it's a feeling of judgment is the reason why people make those decisions, right? They feel judged, mm-hmm. and they don't want to be judged. And they don't want to be condescended to, right? And that's a feeling. It's an emotion, right? And so the first way to start combating that weird emotion is with a little bit of reason. So I would start there, and what I would do is I would ask you to explain to me why you value those strangers' opinions. And then when you don't have a single good answer for me, you'll start to question why you do. And part of the reason that people value the opinions of others more than themselves is because they don't have self-respect. So if I tell you that I respect someone, what does that mean?
Means you value them.
Right.
Means you look up to them.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like they're important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Right. And so you should consider what reputation you have with yourself. The reputation you have with yourself is very critical. So if you say you're going to do something, you tell yourself you're going to go do this work or you're going to achieve this, you make your promise to yourself, and then you don't show up for yourself, then your reputation with yourself is compromised. And your opinion of yourself is lessened, and you don't have the self-respect that you should have as a person because you decided to not keep your word to yourself. And so when you do that, you get the value from other people. And the reason why is because you can also look at those people and say, oh, that guy has a car, I respect him. That guy has the clothes I want, I respect him. Through the shallowness, right? Because you also make snap judgments. And then you start to value that opinion because they have the success that you denied yourself based off of what you can see.
Sure.
So what you need to do first is, I've said this before and I really like it, is in order to achieve, you need to become a man of your word and then speak great things of yourself. Wow. And that becomes your bond. So now when I say I'm going to do something, it's as good as done. And I know that about myself. And when you have that respect and that knowledge about yourself, you don't rely on the outside feedback because you know it's noise.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, if I don't have any self-respect for myself, I then have to get it from everyone else. I have to get this fake sense of security and compliments and everything else from other people. And my self-worth is valued, the value of my self-worth is based on that and all of the things that I can buy to make myself look like I'm doing the things that I'm too lazy or too unmotivated or undisciplined to do. Interesting.
Well, yeah, it's like you measure yourself off the opinions of other people, and that's totally out of your control.
Right.
Like what a horrible life to lead.
Yeah. It is hard, though. I'll tell you that much. It's difficult to do it, but also not really. If you try it, if you actually try it and say, listen, I'm going to have some discipline. I'm going to start to work on my life. It's going to make you feel so much better about yourself, and you're going to have much greater self-worth, right? And if you start to do those things, it can be pretty easy to ignore others' opinions of you. You know, once you put it into practice and start, you have some sort of consistency with your discipline. Yeah, it's definitely doable, but if you don't go that deep with it, you're just never going to get over that feeling of needing the external approval of everybody else around you.
It just makes you so vulnerable and weak to need that from other people.
It's pointless. It's stupid. It's so stupid. It's such a human flaw. I wish we could get over it more easily, but I don't know. Maybe that's kind of the joy in life, though. It's kind of the joy in the journey. And if you can, it's like doing a hard workout. It's like learning how to properly budget. It's like learning how to invest your money, learning how to properly invest your time. You can get so much joy if you can overcome the struggle it takes to get to the place where you are doing those things properly, right? So there's nothing good comes easy, right? So if you're going to do something and you expect to get a great reward out of it, such as the reward of being able to finally breathe and look around and not care what people think about you because you know that you're handling your business, a situation like that, if you want that, right, that's going to require work. It's going to require discipline. It's not going to be easy, but the reward you get is going to be so valuable.
It's proportionate.
People will never know that if they don't. It's sad. Most people won't ever get to the place where they're like that. And it's like, you remember, what was it, Jeff Bezos? He was a billionaire, I think, at the time. And he was still driving around in like a Ford Taurus or something, some little Honda. Yeah. Right? It's like, who cares? I got this crazy company, man. Like, why am I driving around in a Ferrari? He had his life, and he was focused on his life, right? That was sheer focus. I don't know. People need to try more than they are. You have to be honest with yourself when you're not actually trying as much either.
And it's also interesting is the thing that prevents them from trying to change that is the judgment of others at the same time. Because if you look at it like when you fail, oftentimes the most painful part is other people seeing it.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And judging you and being like, oh, you said you were going to do that. And, you didn't, like you kind of fell on your face and like, that was embarrassing, dude,
We all saw it.
We all saw it. And now in today's day and age, it's probably on video.
Yeah.
Where it's on record and it's public information. And that is partially what scares people because they're not even afraid to fail. They're afraid to be judged for their failures. So one thing I've been doing, and it's been so incredibly helpful for me, and I hope that anyone listening to this is able to use this. Whenever I begin to do something, and as I begin, I start to realize that whatever I'm writing down or whatever I'm creating isn't what I imagined in my head initially. I say, no, just do it badly. Do the bad first draft. So I like to think of it like this is when you try to create without failing, it's like trying to create a clay pot without the misshapen clay. So you have to start with something. You have to have material to build on. And it's okay for that material to be ugly. Right. And it's okay for it to look out of shape and weird and not make sense.
Right.
You need the material to start with because that is the clay from which you make the masterpiece.
Right.
And so start with the bad draft because there's nothing impressive about a person that was born like with a gift and they can just pull this off. Like there's not like when you just like, oh, well, that person, they did nothing to earn that.
Sure.
But when you bleed and you sweat for something and you cry and you struggle, That's inspiring. There's nothing inspiring about someone who's 8 feet tall who can dunk. It's like, well, of course you can. If you couldn't, we'd all be really weirded out at that.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of judgment.
Right? But if you can get a
way.
5-foot dude who can dunk, you'd be like, wow, how is that even possible?
Right. Right. Yeah, you won't know good until you've seen the bad version. You know? So yeah, you should not be afraid to have that first mistake to screw the thing up, right? Because that's how you learn. It's really one of the best teaching tools is for you to mess it up the first time.
Completely.
And then you can. Life is not so. It's not so strict where you can't make any mistakes at all, right? No. Regardless of, like we were talking about in the last podcast, regardless of what they teach you in school and how they throw that at you, right? Your mistakes are fine. It's fine to make a mistake. The problem with a mistake is when you refuse to learn from the mistake and try to correct it and do better.
Right.
That's when it becomes a real problem for people. Okay? So go back and review your life. Look at your past, right?
Reflect.
You lived through it. You made those decisions. Sit there and look back and ask yourself, this is where I'm at right now. Everything I did got me here. Is it enough? Am I still making mistakes that I need to correct to take me to a better place in the future? You know, is this life that I'm living the definition of insanity? Right? Going through it over and over and over and over again and not learning your lesson and trying to make another draft and recorrect or correct your mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to review game tape. Review game tape.
You got a Monday morning quarterback it.
Feedback.
Wow. Sorry. This is a problem, man.
This is an issue that you created, brother.
Jesus. So, is there anything else we want to cover about work-life balance, budgeting, trying to find your self-worth? Is there anything that you think maybe we missed in any of that? The lesson out of all of that, I would say, there's a common thing here that can be learned, like when we're talking about work-life balance, when we're talking about learning how to budget, when we're talking about correcting your mistakes and trying to stop caring about what people feel about you, right? One thing that you're going to have to give up in all of this is your pride, okay? Work-life balance, you say, oh, I don't have work-life balance because I hate my job and because everything sucks, and right? So, okay, well, what could get you out of that situation, right? To give up your pride, maybe you're going to have to go down, start at a different job, and work your way up from the bottom at that job, you know, to go somewhere where you can see in the future that's going to be a much better place for you. You're going to have to sacrifice some of your pride where you think, oh, well, I'm the manager at Wendy's right now, right? I can't go back. I'm just going to be a peon over here. I'll just stay where I'm at, right? Your pride will prevent you from budgeting properly. 100% your pride will prevent you from doing that. What people think about you, your pride will keep you in a place where you constantly value other people's opinions and you have no self-worth unless you have objects in your life that make you feel like they're giving you some kind of
status
self-worth.
Symbols and all this nonsense.
Other than internal self-worth. Right? Pride will kill you.
Pride.
And it's not worth it.
Cometh before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall.
It's a great scripture.
Yes, it is.
Silas, so you're involved in real estate now. How's it going? Just I just wanted to throw this broad question out there first to start this off with, because it's important to ask that question, I think. How is it going? Just simply put. Are you depressed about anything? Is it way more work than you thought it was going to be? Low risk? No reward? high risk, whatever. Like, how's it going? Just generally. Because I'm going to ask some more specific questions.
Yeah, I would say it has been challenging in all the right ways. It's been very fun, and it's kind of interesting because I won't say too much, but with some decisions that I've made over the last few months, I thought I should feel a lot more stress than I do.
Nice.
And I don't feel it.
Why do you think that is?
So I'll give you a couple rational reasons, and then I'll give you a very personal reason. The rational reasons are, I look at life in terms of what I can control. And so every day I attempt, and I feel that I often succeed, though not every day perfectly, at doing absolutely everything within my power to ensure the right outcomes for myself. And so with that, I sleep peacefully because I know that I couldn't have done any better.
You did the work.
I did what I had to do. So that helps. But we can get into, why don't we get into a personal reason? So before I left my previous occupation, I was getting myself educated. I was getting my license and whatnot. And I was kind of planning out how I was going to make the transition into real estate. I had thought that I would continue to work, and then after my shift, I would do real estate. And I was praying at my bedside one night. I think it was probably just before a weekend, Friday night, I think. And I was like, how am I doing? What's going on here? Like, do you have any feedback for me? What should I be doing better? And I got an instruction to quit my job Monday. So I had Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday morning to think about the decision. And I was like, I was a little bit worried when I heard that. And I was trying to like rationalize, and I was trying to get it explained to me. And it was told to me, and you might think this sounds woo-woo, but it was told to me because I was worried. I was like, well, I probably won't be successful quickly enough, and I'll run out and I'll lose everything that I built. But I was told that if I made the decision to trust despite the risk, that wouldn't happen, that the meal barrel wouldn't run dry, to put it biblically. And so I made that decision to trust, and I've had peace with the decision since.
Wow. That's impressive. And that's good to hear. I'm sure anytime you step off the ledge, and you just take that leap of faith to do something bigger than what you've been doing. Generally, what I've found out, you can psych yourself up in your head, and turn it into something that it's not. And when you get there and you find out, and usually this will happen if, like you said, you put in the work necessary, right, beforehand, right? So if you study properly, you prepare, you plan, and then you get to the game and you know all the rules, and you're well enough prepared where it's like, I can calm down now and just, this is not nearly as bad as I thought it was, Your mind can play games on you like that, and it's always a beautiful thing when you're able to have that experience. So that's great to hear, This was something that I was going to bring up later in the podcast, but since you kind of already brought it up, I want to keep talking about it while we're here and on that subject. God and faith.
Yeah.
Right? So, man. Boy, our lives have been strange. I'll tell you that much.
They have.
Right? But you said you were praying about this, right? You're on your knees praying.
Mm-hmm.
You heard, when you say, I heard quit your job on Monday, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
Some people, like you said, people will
Right.
call you crazy for saying something like that. That was just your internal voice talking, right? So when you say I heard, what do you mean by that? Do you think God was able to invade your thoughts and plant that thought in your head? Were you just going on this faith feeling that you had, where you kind of got this sense of peace while you were praying about this decision, and it just brought you to the conclusion that you need to do it? Or do you think God talked to you?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. No. I mean, I think a lot of people hear God and don't recognize him.
Interesting.
They wouldn't recognize it as God.
Boy, that's kind of scary thought as well.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Boy, I want to add to that just too. Because me personally, right, I've had a great relationship with God through my life, right? Our parents raised us that way. And as you grow up, you develop your own personal beliefs and personal relationship with whatever. Like, it wouldn't have been, I could have gone and chosen to be an atheist, right? You know, your parents don't decide how you believe, but our parents were very valuable in pointing us in a certain direction, having us explore that, giving us all the facts, giving us the knowledge, preparing us, and letting us go and make our own decisions, right? And I've chosen God. I'll say that much in my life. I have chosen God. Am I as well versed as I should be? Am I as well studied? Do I know everything? No, right? One of the things, though, that throughout my life, I'll give an example, too, of one situation where it was about as clear as day. But a lot of times I've prayed, and I'm praying, and I'm praying, and then, like you said, I'll think I hear this, well, go do this, or this is what you should do. And my mind will go, oh, the pride of you to think that God is talking to you right now in this moment.
That's interesting.
Yeah, how dare you think that God is just, he's going to give you the answer and he just said it in your head. No, this is just my own, this is how I always, it's something I had to fight with, you know? Because it's like, how dare you think God
would take the time to speak to you.
Especially because if you think you might be praying for a minuscule problem, something that's just like, you know, kind of tailored to your own little life. It's like, God, I don't know what to do. Like, help me, give me the answer type of a situation. It's like, why would God, you know, he figure it out, Jared. You know, figure this one out, buddy. I'm not going to give you the answer. So I would always in my head, if I thought I heard an answer, I would always kind of cancel it out and go, no, that God was not talking to you. That was, don't be prideful. That was you. Your brain just said that, right? So I've always struggled with that, you know? And I wonder if it has led me in different, right? It's like, how do you know when God spoke to you? But I'll give an example of one time where I can't argue. You know, if ever there was a moment where God spoke to me, and actually I'll give you two moments.
Okay, I love it.
If ever there were two moments in my life when I know God spoke to me, it would be these two. Okay, one of them was, I'd been struggling for a while, trying to figure out if I was going to quit my job at a certain place and move somewhere else, right? And same situation. And I would pray, like, God, what do you want me to do? And I would honestly tell you, I prayed about this for probably a year and heard nothing. I prayed all the time about it. And I would text Dad, you know, because I got to this point, too, where I was like, I texted Dad one night and I said, Dad, I was struggling with a lot of stuff. I didn't feel like I had proven to myself that I always wanted to be a man, right? Growing up, like mom and dad will tell you this. I always wanted to be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at this point, I don't know, what was this? 5-6 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was at this point where I was like, I have not proven to myself that I've earned the title of being a man, right? Mm. And I remember I texted Dad one night and I said, and this is while I was praying, right, throughout this year period to God, like, help me make a decision. What do I need to do with my life? What should I do? Please give me knowledge, give me wisdom. That was one of the things I would always pray for. I wasn't praying for money. I wasn't praying for anything other. I would get down on my knees and I would say, God, please give me knowledge and give me wisdom. Give me the foresight to see and understand the direction that I need to take with my life. And I remember I texted Dad one night. I said, Dad, I got to join the military. I said, I'm going. Like, I'm going to go join the military. And Dad said, why? Why are you going to do that? I was like, I need to prove to myself. I need to do something that proves to me that I am the man that I think I am. And that was the only thing I could think of, right? I'm going to take
undeniable.
Right. I'm kind of going to take my life out of my hands and put it in someone else's hands, and they're going to test me against their standards. It's not me, kind of creating my own
self-evaluation,
right, where I have a way out, right? Mm-hmm. You go join the military, either you make it or you don't. And I was going to go join the hardest branches I could find, whatever that may be, whatever I could get into, I was going to go straight there, right? And I had a long talk with Dad about it, and it's like kind of the self-worth conversation we were having earlier, where you tie up your self-worth in external things, like your achievements, you're only as good as, if you're not a lawyer, you're worthless, kind of a thing, right? So I was at this point in my life where it's like, if I don't go join the military and I get into the hardest branch possible, I'm worthless. I'm not a man, that was at this point. Mm-hmm. Well, Dad talked me out of it.
Dad's good at that.
Yeah, he made it make sense to me, and he made some very valid points, and I didn't join the military, right? But I continued to pray every single day, like, God, please give me knowledge, give me wisdom. What's the next step in life? Like, where do I need to go? What do I need to do? And it got to this point where I did hear this little voice in my head, and it said, go home. Go home. And then I would continue to hear that thought. Right? It happened one night while I was praying, and then from that day forward, every time I would go specifically in prayer to ask God, what do I need to do with my life, I would keep hearing this annoying little, go home, go home, go home. And I'm like, I'm home right now. I'm in my house. What does that mean? Go home. Okay. So I even remember I texted that to Dad. I said, Dad, I keep hearing go home. Like, do I need to come home? What do I need to do? I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, so this goes on for about a year, like I said. Gets to the end of that year. I was coming to visit you guys, and I was going to try to make it there for church. Because we do a little thing, a gathering at our house, right? And as I'm driving down the interstate, I come up. We're in this road construction zone, and I come up behind this little pickup truck, and this old man's just driving it, this old farmer, and he's going slow in front of me, and I'm like, oh, God, I'm getting up to this guy. And because when I'm in a construction zone, I'm going fast, okay? Whatever. Say what you want about me. There were nobody around. It was the weekend, right? I'm going fast, but he was going slow.
Right.
And I got up on his bumper because I'm trying to get him to move. And across the back of this pickup truck, it said, the way of the cross leads home. And it was like, wow. And I had literally just been praying that for the last year. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What decision do I need to make? And God kept telling me, go home, go home, go home. The way of the cross leads home was written across the back of this pickup truck. It's like, geez.
I mean, spelled it out as simply as he possibly could.
Yeah. And what I learned from that, I guess, the kind of lesson I learned from it is stay with God. Walk with God. Be close with God in your life. And everywhere you're at is going to be the right place. You know, so if you're wondering, oh, God, where do I need to be? Where do I need to be? What do I need to be doing? Make sure you're with God in your life. And then you can be anywhere, right? God doesn't need to give you, oh, you need to be in this city, right? Some people he might say that to. But sometimes you just need to be with God. You need to, the way of the cross will lead you home. Wherever God is at, that's where you're at home. So that was powerful to me. And it was one of those moments where I felt like God had been speaking to me, literally, you know? It wasn't one of those, like, where I always would go, oh, you're too prideful. How dare you think God's talking to you, right?
Right.
That was one of those moments where it was super clear to me that God was talking to me. But that was a long...
I really like that story, though. That was very interesting because I have a not the same issue, but and this is definitely a me issue. I used to do this thing, right? Because I don't know, and I'm not trying to, I'll just be honest. Like, I usually feel like I know when God is speaking to me. One thing I used to tell is, obviously, if it says anything that obviously contradicts the Bible or it contradicts it anyway, then you're like, okay, well, we can write that one off.
Right.
But the other thing is, any voice that sounds panicked is never God. Because why would he be worried? Why would he be panicking?
Right.
And so it's always calm. It's never like, hey, you're late, you're late, you're late. He's like, hey, you need to do this. It's usually very brief. It's simple. It answers the question. It's a still small voice.
Yeah.
And it's easy to suppress if you want to. And because it's often in your head, one thing that I encountered myself doing was, if I didn't like the instructions, I would write it off, but I would say that was just my thought. I wasn't ignoring God.
That happens.
Right. And so I've been through some scenarios where I had to make decisions, and I was sitting there on my couch thinking about the decision, and I knew in my heart what was right. But I was trying to rationalize something because what I knew was right didn't feel right. And I heard the still small voice again, and he just said, there is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And he was like, what you think is right leads to hell and death. And it was scary to me.
Wow. It's terrifying.
Yeah. And I told that to an individual that I was discussing with. I was like, I think this decision that we're going to make leads to hell. It leads to a life that is hell and bitterness.
Wow. Yeah, not a lot of people have a close enough relationship with God to be able to discern messages that, you know, this is me, this might be God. And it's, you know, I get it too. The people listening, right, who we now live in a world where God is not the thing.
No.
Right? Especially
not popular.
Yeah, especially living in the country that, you know, our catchphrase is one nation under God.
Right.
Right. It's not it anymore.
We're not repping that.
That's a joke. It's not true. So God seems like a very antiquated notion, you know, to a lot of people now. It's like, oh, you still do the God thing? Like, it's 2024. We have science now. Like, you're talking to
2024 years since what?
Yeah. Right. Right. Great point. It's like you're talking to this guy with a big beard that sits on clouds and plays violins, right? People will, I get what they're doing. Whatever you need to do.
It's
right?
something that's easy to
make
try
fun of
and ridicule. Yeah.
Sure.
But
it's easy.
It's easy. It's easy. It doesn't require any real thought to try and make fun of it.
Right.
But one thing that's interesting to me, and this is the thing that I strongly dislike about the chronological or the sequential arguments that people make is, oh, this is antiquated. It's old. I'm like, truth is old. It's still true.
Right.
The truth, you don't outgrow that.
It's a great point.
You do not outgrow the truth. 1,000 years ago, what was true today was true then.
Yeah.
You just need to deal with that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to convince someone who has that opinion of God to. I can sit here and talk to you all day long and not convince you that any of this is real. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're not willing to look at it with an open mind whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's plenty of even scientific proof, historical proof, archaeological proof that the stories in the Bible are true. You know, that there's evidence all around us that points to an intelligent creator. There's design. There's everything. You know, I could give you a great argument to prove the existence of God as much as humanly possible. But it's still, it's like if you want to tell someone why you should vote for a specific candidate and they say, right, I'm not going to vote for that candidate. And you say, why? And you list off this and that and this, and you show them the videos, right? And you say, now, why won't you vote? And they say, I just hate him. I don't like him. Like, how do you now argue with this person? It's like, well, okay, then. I got nothing else to say to you.
The first thing is, understanding the battle that you're fighting when you have discussions like that, which is, firstly, that I never make an attempt to convince anyone else to change their mind. Right. What I do is I make the argument for my own position, and I'm happy to defend that with reason and logic and evidence. And once I've defended that to my satisfaction, or as much as is necessary, I'm fine if you're not persuaded, because being persuaded is a choice.
Absolutely.
You know? Mm-hmm. But a lot of what's interesting about when you look at what's true, like if I define what's true as what you can observe physically, if I can observe something, if I can observe that these curtains are red.
Objective reality,
right? Even that can be questioned, because you can question the lens through which it is measured or observed, such as our senses and our intellect. And so in order to assume that that is the standard of truth, you have to also assume that what you see and what you touch is real, and it's not misguided at all or inaccurate. And that what you think and the thoughts that you think and the logic that you have, that you exercise, is also accurate. And those are all things that you don't think to question. Those are the things that you really believe. The stuff that you never think to question is what you actually believe. And it's so ingrained in us, we don't even think of it as a belief. I believe that when I see that there's a camera there, I don't question it. I've seen it. That's truth now.
Right.
But the issue is that you can't get people to question the things that they believe at that level unless they're actually looking for the truth. If they think they have the truth already, they can't learn anything.
That's a great way to say it too. And people think they have the truth already. Right? It's evolution. We blew up. We got, the Big Bang. We did this, we did that.
Random mutation.
There's no God. Yeah, it's just random patterns of mutation and species and organisms and whatever else. And if that's what you choose to believe, I can't change your mind, right? I just hate when people will believe something like that, and then you tell them, I believe in God, I believe in this great, powerful creator that made all of this, and they look at you with such
disdain.
God, you believe in ridicule. Magic?
Well, that's the thing, right? Because it's so easy to make casual arguments that sound intelligent against it, right? So if you take, for example, we may as well go here. We're already here, so we may as well go all the way, right? So if you take, for example, the resurrection of Jesus in the Bible, right? And I'll just make a simple argument, right? I'll make this argument. It sounds really smart. And I actually really like this argument. I think it's very simple and it's very aesthetic.
Okay.
It's like, okay, we know it's impossible for someone who's been dead for 3 days to come back to life. Physically impossible.
Okay.
Therefore, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So we rule out that he came back from the dead by default. And we assume that the disciples lied, no matter how unlikely it is that 200 people lied and were tortured to death and basically ran for the rest of their years and were persecuted for this thing that they believed and professed, right? However unlikely that is, it's more likely than something that's impossible.
Okay.
And so then we can believe that, right? Simple, done, easy.
Yeah.
All right?
Interesting.
But if you analyze the actual claim, it says that the Son of God died and rose from the dead. That's a different claim. It doesn't say an ordinary man did this. And now we know that the God that is described definitely has that power within his grasp. So then the question is different. The question is, how plausible is God? And that's a different argument.
Ah.
And I think he's very plausible.
100% he is. Whether or not you can get people, you know, like you said, I'm not going to try to convince you.
Totally, yeah.
But don't make fun of my belief either, right? Because there's nothing irrational or crazy about it if you actually look at the facts of the story, the historical story, right? Yeah, we kind of got off in the weeds on that, but
A little bit, yeah.
just a little. We both have a deep faith, right? Not perfect people at all,
No,
but we're
not
working
definitely.
on it. So I wrote down a question. But I mean, maybe we've already kind of answered this, but I'll just throw it out there. This is my thing, son.
Yeah, go ahead. I love it.
So any worthy endeavor requires mental, physical, and spiritual strength, generally. So how do you think your faith has helped you as you navigate through your life? Whether it be trying to make decisions. If you didn't have faith, here's a better way to phrase this question.
Ooh, I like how this is going.
Yeah. If you did not have your faith, how successful do you think you would be? How much at peace do you think you would be? How what's the word?
How secure, certain.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Could you eliminate your faith and still be okay, do you think?
Not me. I couldn't do that. That wouldn't work for me for a lot of reasons. Because it's been integral for me for so long with so many different things that I don't really have the ability to go on without it. I would feel very lost. And you might say, oh, well, you're indoctrinated, but we could argue about that. But part of that issue for me is I don't think I've made a lot of important decisions that I didn't make on faith. A lot of things that I didn't think I could do, that I was afraid to do, that I thought were out of my reach. I heard that still small voice say that he got me and to just keep going. And so I did it, and it was still hard, but I look back and I'm so grateful because even though the place I was in and a lot of the battles I was fighting weren't battles I needed to fight because I needed to win them, but I needed to fight them in order to know that I had the courage. And that gave me the courage I needed later when I was going to need it and not have the time to develop it.
Right.
So it's like when you train and you don't lift the weights because it's an emergency, but when it's an emergency and you need the strength and you need to defend your loved ones or you need to run because you got to get there and you don't have a car, right? You need to have already developed that ability. And so that was very, very important for me.
That's good. That's good. Faith is important. Some people have yoga. You know, some people have the gym. Some people go and shoot guns. You can have all of those things, but why not also have God in your life and that strong sense of faith? Because it can bring an immeasurable amount of peace to your life too. At least that's what I've learned. Have you ever questioned or been angry with God about something? And an example of that is people always say, how could God let, this woman get murdered and tortured like this? How could God let these children die in these wars, right? Mm-hmm. That's an example of people questioning God. And it's a valid point. It's a valid thing to bring up, right? To question God like that and to be angry at God. How could you? How could you allow? Mm-hmm. How could God allow, right? Mm-hmm. One of the ways I always answer that question, and I'll ask you how you answer it, I say a better way to look at that is, don't say, how could God allow? You should ask, why did the devil? Or why did the man? Or why did that individual? Or why did this country? Mm-hmm. It's like God did not take away our free will. So it's not like God is up there and he's saying, yes, murder those innocent people, kill them. That's, if you look at God, that's not his thing at all. Mm-hmm. But the devil, the man who is not in control of his emotions, the country who has bad intentions towards another country, they can go and do some of these atrocities to human beings. And then for you to turn around and say, how can God? It's not, you're asking the wrong question. It's why did the devil? Why did the man? Why did that woman make that choice? Why did this country do this? We all still have free will. But back to the question, in situations, have you ever questioned God about something, or you been pissed off at him?
That is a great question. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I think I have to say I've never questioned in terms of doubted. I've tried to negotiate on decisions I was afraid of. But other than that, I don't know, I'm the kind of person like, I only see my mistakes. I don't see other people's mistakes because I only think, again, in terms of the things that I can control. And so to me, it's just irrelevant, the other things. And the only thing that's relevant to me is what I could have done differently. And that's how I gain the most power to change things. Right. But no, I mean, and the question that you laid out is so difficult to answer because there's components to it, because there's logical components as well as emotional components. Like there's an emotional component of how dare you, but there's the logical component of this is inconsistent with the idea of an all-powerful, all-loving God, right? Right. And so there's a quote that I really like, which is quite interesting, and it seems like it's almost what's being used against God in this example, which is that every man is responsible for the good that he didn't do, which is quite interesting. All the good you could have done and you didn't do it, shame on you. And that's kind of what we say to God, right? Wow. Mm-hmm. Here's one thing I'll do is there's different elements to this question, and it's too complicated to try and answer both of them at the same time, but there are answers to both sides. So we'll start with the logical one because that's easy to dissect, and then we can go to the emotional side. For the logical component, one way I like to look at it is in the Bible, what the world is described at is it's described as a present evil world. And so that's accurate. So when people make this remark on the injustices and they want to question why that might have been allowed, it's a great question. But I would also say that we were told it was this way by the same God that we're questioning. Right. So it isn't that he promised wine and roses and ease and comfort and all things good, and we didn't get that. We were promised a present evil world. We were warned about that, and that's what we have. So there's nothing incongruent about the way the Bible describes the world and the way that it is in that aspect.
Yeah.
That's one point.
It's like for you to say, how dare God allow, how could he allow such a terrible thing to happen? It's almost like you are ignoring the existence of evil in the world when you say that, because you're not accounting for that half of the equation. Mm-hmm. It's like something horrible happened, something brutal and unfair and ungodly happened, and you're not going to go to the evil in this world and blame the evil for what occurred.
Because God could have stopped it. Because God could have stopped it.
You're going to ask God why not. Instead of, but also you have to give the responsibility has to be placed on the individual that made that decision to do that atrocity, right?
Yes.
But then they will say, but God could have stopped it, right?
And that's something that's interesting. So here's something that's tricky about good and evil. Good and evil, like let's break this down, right? Any good man will tell you that he has done bad, which means that the bad man, which is a man who does bad, is also the same man. So good and bad are not cast into which you are born. They are a choice in each moment. And so with that, I want to outline this in a very understandable way. If I take an object and I use it to harm someone else, the object is not considered immoral or unscrupulous because it had no choice in the matter. But if it had, it would have to be held accountable. And so the issue is that in order for good to exist, in order for a good being, a good entity to exist, they must have some level of choice. And what choice creates is not evil, but it creates the possibility of evil by necessity. And so in order to eliminate the possibility of evil, you would also have to eliminate the possibility of any good beings. Because if we could only do what God wanted us to do, we wouldn't be good. We would just be robots.
Right.
So if you want to get rid of all the evil, you also have to sacrifice all of the good of humanity as well. And it could be perfect. It could be perfect, but there would be no true love between brothers because they didn't have a choice but to love each other and support each other and hold each other up.
Right.
I have a choice to be here with you. You have a choice to be here with me. And that's what makes it good. But if I stand two trees next to each other, it means nothing.
Sure. I like that. Very great way of explaining it. And remember, too, when you ask next time, whoever is out there and listening to this, the next time you say, how could God allow something terrible? You say God could have stopped it. Also say this, so could the devil have stopped something evil from happening. Two sides to the coin. Yeah, God could have stopped it, and so could the devil. The evil could have stopped itself, and the good could have stopped it, right? But which one are you going to blame?
And there's something else, which is that there's no power in seeing evil and choosing to be discouraged and succumb to it. What's really powerful is when you see something horrible happen to a person and they get up and they still do good. There's something far more powerful about that and far more inspiring and moving about that.
Yeah.
It's like you could say, all right, bad thing happened. And so now what do we do? What good does it do us to sit here and blame and complain? And I'm not saying there's no point to that, but what I'm saying is, how effective is it at making things better? And so I want to look at it from a practical perspective as well, which is that we make the world better by deciding to aim upwards and to carry ourselves with respect and godliness despite the evil. And that is what makes it a better world.
Agreed. I like that. What would you say to someone that says there is no God and they're perfectly happy and at peace with their life thinking that?
Do you ever think about your death?
It's kind of like that thing Dad brought up. It's like if you die and I die and what you believe is true, both of us are fine. But if you die and I die and what I believe is true, you have a massive problem. And you're going to have a very painful existence in the afterlife. And I'm going to be fine. So it's like, what do you want to risk here? But people can't give up the instant gratification of their lives to look at, and to a certain extent, it's understandable. None of us know what's actually going to happen when we die, right? We have faith. We have our religious beliefs. We have evidence to a certain extent, but no one has ever died and been gone for years and come back and tell us all, this is what happens. They're going to line you up and judge you, and you might go to hell or you might go to heaven, or nothing happened. It was all just darkness. I was floating around. I was an eternal spiritual being. It was beautiful. We don't get that, right? So people, and I get it. I understand. People look at life as, this is all I have. This is all any of us know. I'm alive right now. Why would I not give myself all of the pleasures that I desire? Why would I live this strict life of like a monk? Oh, and I just meditate.
Deny yourself
and
everything.
I pray. Yeah, and all the beauty that's around me and all the urges that I have, I don't fulfill any of those. I just live this meager, gray, dull existence, and then we die, and you don't know what the hell happens after we die. You can't prove that to me, right? They have this thing, valid argument. All I can say, going back to what you said, what happens after you die, though? If I'm right, if the Bible is right, if science, evidence that backs up the Bible, if all of that is right, you will have a massive problem when it's all said and done. And just excluding the God part of that equation, just to live your life in a good way towards other people. Do you believe in karma? A lot of these people who say there is no God or whatever, they'll also believe heavily in karma. Oh, don't do that. Karma will get you, this and that and whatever else. Okay, well,
it's like, that's just reaping and sowing, but yeah.
Right.
Well, and here's the thing to me about, I have several points on that. I really like what you said. One thing I want to ask, because I like to ask questions, because I'm here, I want to investigate. And so something that's thought-provoking to me is to ask, is a life lived without any hope better than a life lived with hope? And it's not. I don't think it is.
Right.
Do you want to live a hopeless life? And so you want to condemn the hope that I have, but your life isn't going to be better because you don't have that hope. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the things that people tend to think they need in order to fulfill their lives fleshly and in this world are, they're hedonistic, they're short-sighted, and they're selfish. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. You think I need this alcohol. I need to put this gently, selfishly exploit and utilize other people to gratify my own pleasure, and predatorially and psychopathically manipulate people into getting what I want. And when you think about, like, listen, if I have this urge I want to gratify, I'm going to get it gratified, and you're going to help me, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Right. Now, there's nothing irrational about that. It's just immoral. But if this is all that there is to this life, then there's actually nothing about that makes any sense to say, yeah, you should deny yourself that. So first of all, these things that you think you need to deny, that you think you're denying yourself and you're sacrificing a good life, you're just sacrificing a hedonistic, selfish life. And it won't prevent you from suffering to gratify those things.
But what if they're good people? What if you are a good person without God?
Well,
then are you still living a hedonistic and selfish life? What if you still help people, you donate to soup kitchens?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So to define without God is tricky. Without a belief in God?
Without the belief.
Okay, without a belief in God, you can still, without a professed belief in God, you can still practice the things that you're told to practice, but you just don't know where you got it from, right? You can do that.
I wonder what happens to those people.
Well,
in the end of it all, if it's, let's say God exists, but you never had any kind of relationship, never did any digging, but you also lived a very good, wholesome life. You didn't really do anything wrong. It's curious, would God judge you for that at the end?
I would say there's different ways I want to answer that.
I know exactly how you might answer it.
I mean, how do you think I would answer it? Because I have two answers. I bet you know the first one. The second one, I bet you don't know.
Okay. Ignorance of the law is no excuse type of an answer.
Sure, right?
Where it's like the Bible and the knowledge is heavily available for you. So for you to show up at the end and say, well, I didn't know, would be a lie. You chose not to find out the answer, basically, would be you chose not to know.
That could be one, yeah.
And that means you chose not to have a relationship with God, which he might look at in a very negative way.
Well, that's the thing. It says unbelief, and this is just me. This is not me trying to be a holier than thou condescending person, but just in the Bible it's written unbelief is a sin. Now here's something let me describe this to you, because let me just describe the alternative. What if you said, I don't love God, I don't believe in God, you die and you go to heaven. Now, let me describe that differently. There's this person you don't believe in, you don't like, and you don't want them in your life, and they say, you're going to spend an eternity with me. Yeah. That's hell.
Interesting.
So I'm going to say that. But here's another thing I want to say, and this is about the concept of good itself. So in the Bible, God says, and I feel like I always mess this up, but I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, right? Okay, so he doesn't say, I'm going to show you the way. He says, I am the way. He doesn't just say, I'm going to tell you the truth. He says, I am the truth. He doesn't say, I'm going to give you, is it life or light?
Life.
Life. He doesn't say, I'm going to give you life necessarily in this line. He says, I am the life. We'll have to look at that, because I've always kind of said it a certain way where
once I said it again in my head, you could say it either way. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. But either way, right? He identifies himself as the thing itself and not just someone directing you towards it. So that's something I want to come back to. So there's been a question, and this is a question which has been posed classically, and I think it was Socrates, and he said, when God loves something, does he love it because it is good, or does his loving it make it good? And the answer, which has been given classically, is he loves it because he is identical to the good. And so what that means is that God is not merely a good being, but God is goodness itself. So with that in mind, if you live a good life and you die, but you've said, I would like to be separate from God, and you don't understand what that means, it means you would be separated from all that is good. And that is what would describe hell. And so you're asking for hell without knowing it. But here's the kicker, and this is just me because this is just me like kind of experimenting with the thought, is if your character were also separated from all of the good, because that is technically God, you would also become the kind of person who deserved that.
That's part of that doesn't sound fair at all. You know, it's a it's a tough one.
It is tough.
It's one of the unknowns, right? It's how would you know what happens at the end of that?
Well,
we can theorize.
Here's one thing. I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, say it.
So there's a law in physics, and it is basically summarized in that nothing can be created or destroyed, only converted to a different form. It's basically what it says.
Energy.
Right. And so you notice, like, when we destroy something, it's like, well, you burn this, but there's ashes, and you can't really actually make it disappear, like it's gone. And so with that, you have to understand that when you die, you're dead, right? And we're looking at your body, and we see your body, and it's like it's almost exactly the same as when you were alive, but supposedly you're not there. And so given that the law of physics dictates that things cannot be created nor destroyed, and we look at your body and say you had a heart attack or you passed away in your sleep, and it's exactly the same as you sitting in this chair, only there's no heartbeat. We say Jared's gone, but here's his body. Something has left, and it's something eternal by definition. By the laws of physics, it wasn't destroyed, it was converted. It's somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so to me, like, even when you look at dead bodies, they lose their electrical pulse. Living bodies have an electrical pulse.
Sure.
Which is interesting. So where did that energy go? It wasn't destroyed. It means it's eternal energy and it's somewhere else. Now, that's kind of crazy to think about.
It is.
But when you think about the Bible saying there's an eternal component to you that lives on after your physical form dies, it kind of seems like that's empirically verifiable almost.
Sure, but does that eternal energy have a conscience and an understanding? Or is it literally just that? Is it electrical energy? How do you prove that?
That's interesting.
Right? Because we'll say, oh, it's your soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's your essence. That's your being, right?
Well,
But is it just an electrical pulse? Like these are the things people will argue with you on.
Right.
It's like, no, it's just your electrical, now it just goes energy. It's just energy. It goes back to the universe.
Well, what's interesting is you look at this scientifically, like, we think we're so smart, right? And, we're pretty smart. But the thing is, like, and go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but scientifically, we don't have a really, like, great, like, concrete definition for life. The scientific definition for life basically describes a bunch of different attributes of living organisms. Say, well, it's irritable, meaning it responds to stimulus. Like if you poke it, it moves, or it does this, right? It grows, right? Either through accretion or absorption, right? It reproduces, right? You have all of these different aspects, right? But we can't describe it in any concrete way. And then if you think about it, you say, well, I could describe the thoughts in my mind as chemical reactions, but then that means that there's no such thing as logic. It's just, at the base level, it's just atoms that interact with other atoms in a specific way, and none of it means anything. And so the issue is that we believe in a lot of things that are not physical and that we can't prove, and we can't function without acting as if they're real.
Right.
That's how real they are. So how can you doubt that? At a certain level, it's like, if I say there's 2 bottles on this desk right now, and then we take the bottles away and they're gone, and I say, now how many bottles are there? There's 0 bottles. Okay, so we can get rid of the objects and the number remains. There's still a number there. Now, how could you get rid of numbers, for example? A universe with no numbers would be a universe with 0 numbers, which means you have 1 number, which means you can count by ones, which means you still have all the numbers. We can't even conceive of a universe without numbers.
Wow.
There are some things that are so real we can't even imagine not having them. And those things are not physical at all. You can say they're concepts, but what does that mean?
Whew, my brain hurts.
I know, mine too.
Maybe you should be a professor. You ever thought about that?
You know, I used to think I wanted to be a philosophy professor, actually.
Yeah. Did you study philosophy?
I read some philosophy books. Yeah, I liked those.
So, what do you say to the person that says there is no God and I'm happy and I don't care?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't try and convince someone. I would say, you don't know that there's no God, though, but I'm glad that you're happy.
And you're probably going to hell.
I wouldn't add that.
Just throw it in on the end.
I mean, you might. You could be a bitter person. Vengeful.
Is there anything about God and faith that we haven't really talked about that you want to put in before we switch back?
You know,
we never really talked about where we got all this from. Our Father. Right? That could be a whole nother podcast.
that really could be, actually. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. But if you had something to say, I know I cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. You know, I was talking with Mom today. And I don't know, I feel like I have a lot of belief in things, you know? And like people believe in things that aren't real all the time. Like, and it's no problem. Like we believe in tomorrow. We believe in the future, right? We believe in these things that we have no guarantees on, right? And so there's a verse in the Bible about faith, and it says, faith is the evidence of things hoped for and the substance of things not seen. I hope I'm quoting that correctly. And I was talking to Mom about that and the meaning
it's the
of
substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And so with that, part of my evidence for the things that I'm going to do is the unshakable belief that I have in them. That is the proof. Because I feel like I wouldn't have a vivid ability to see these things if they weren't real. And that's why it's quite interesting, because it says we walk by faith and not by sight, because it's through faith you see the things that are unseen.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah, when it comes to that specific question, from my own personal perspective, I already know that God is not interested in saving everyone.
He's not expecting to save everyone. I mean,
He said he's going to send them a strong delusion that they might believe a lie so they all could be damned, right? So there's a point in humans' existence when God is going to just give up on you and send you all the things that you are looking for to confuse you and drown you in your own self-loathing, your own, desires and wants and whatever else. So to someone who would come up to me and say, there is no God, there is no afterlife, there's no heaven, there's no hell, and I'm happy. I would say, I'm happy that you're happy. And if that works for you, then that's fine.
By me, yeah.
Fine with me. Keep living your life. Be at peace. Bye.
That's all you can do.
That's it.
That's all you can do.
Good luck. Okay? I'm going to keep doing what makes me happy. I'm going to keep doing what I know is right. I'm going to keep following the teachings of God, the teachings of the scripture, and I'm going to hold steadfast in my faith because it brings me peace and because I believe in it. And if you hate that and you think I'm crazy, that's fine too. Okay? God will save those who he wants to save. I'm not necessarily ever going to be the type of person that goes around and evangelizes. I don't believe I was called to ministry. Right? God has people, I think, that he'll give gifts to and place them in those positions. And maybe those people are better positioned to go and have an argument with you about this. Right? But I'm perfectly content if God has not placed it in your heart that you need to have a closer relationship with him, or you need to dig deeper into religion. If that hasn't been placed on you, I'm perfectly fine letting you live your life that way. Unless you having that belief leads you to a place where you start to say, well, since there is no God, since there is no afterlife, since there is no this, no that, I can start murdering people here on earth. I can start attacking children. Now that's where I'm going to step in and we're going to have a real problem, right? So live your life as you want. As long as you're not hurting anybody physically, as long as you're being generally a good human being, I'm not going to evangelize to you. Live your life. Boy, we really got off, man.
Dude.
God have mercy.
I know.
We kind of have to go back to this, though.
Go ahead, yeah.
To the beginning. Couple more questions on real estate. So you've done open houses now at this point, right? Yeah. You're getting into the world of real estate and you're showing houses to people. So, I've watched movies. I've seen YouTube videos where people hype up open house showings and stuff, and they've got all the camera angles with the drones and the music and this, and there's TV shows, real estate shows, right?
Yeah.
How do you like open houses? Is the hype real, or is it really like boring and not nearly as cool? Like, I don't know. I feel like showing houses to people has been kind of hyped up. To me personally, just because I watch real estate shows, right? Like I said, they've got the music, they've got the camera,
the drama, and all
that, right?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy doing it? Is it fun? Is it? Is it? Because the amount of work, right, that you personally have to do in order to show a house to someone, right? You are seeing the back scenes of everything, right? You're doing the paperwork.
Yeah.
You've taken the tests. You've done, the comparative market analysis stuff. You've done all this stuff, right? So showing the house for you probably isn't nearly as cool as the people that just get to show up and walk around this nice house, right? Because you're thinking in your head, oh, God, like I got to get them to sign this, and we got to talk about this, and what if they ask that, right? Is your brain full of all that, or are you just enjoying the moment and walking around showing these people houses?
Sure. So showing houses and open houses, those are two interesting things. When it comes to showing houses, it's really about, because it depends on if you're representing a person or if you're just working with them as a customer. But if you're representing someone and they're your client and you show them a house, I think it's very, very important for you to also have in mind what they've expressed to you is the thing that they're looking for, and to kind of help guide with their assessment of the property, even though they have to make the ultimate decision and they can change their mind. And you can be like, well, but this one's not this, and you said you had to have that, and this one's not this, and you said you had to have that. I'd be like, oh, but it's so beautiful. I'd be like, okay. Now, if you want to change your criteria, that's fine, but just remember that this doesn't meet the criteria, right? Just to be that kind of guiding force, because you're ultimately there only to offer expert counsel and advice, and not to force them to make any decisions, right? That should never happen, because you're representing their interests, so you don't want to get that mixed up. But when it comes to open houses, oftentimes you deal with a lot of people, if it goes well, and you deal with a lot of strangers, right? And so that can be fun and it can be energetic, or it can be dry and boring, and it really depends on what you allow. I always try to bring energy. Even if I don't feel energized, I say, hey, how's it going? Good evening. Welcome. Come in. I'm Silas Jackson. I'm with Capital Real Estate Partners. Introduce myself, shake a hand, right? Make some eye contact, ask them some friendly questions. How's your Sunday going? And then I give them some information on the property. Usually we print out flyers and I'll hand them out. I'll say, this is going to offer you information on the property that's going to answer most of your basic questions. If you have additional questions, you can come to me. Feel free to leave us some feedback. And the biggest thing, because you don't want to be a pushy kind of annoying, irritating, nagging person at these things. What you want to do is make a strong first impression, give them the information, and then let them look. Don't follow them around the house and try and make comments, the whole thing. Let them go. I say, hey, go take a look. You, your wife, and your children, or whoever it is, go take a look. Feel free to make your own personal assessment. I'm not going to stalk you through the house. I'm not going to comment on everything. I'm not going to contradict you and say, that's not nice. I'll be like, actually, that's really nice.
No, it's nice, and this is why. Now sign this.
Right. You don't do any of that.
Yeah.
Because we're actually here to facilitate a good deal for everybody. And we want the person who's interested in a home to actually be interested and not have to have been convinced by an agent.
Sure.
Right. We want you to be excited about the purchase that you're making or the investment that you're making, because you should be. It's a big, big decision.
Yeah.
And so we want to prioritize it. That's number one. So yeah.
Make your own choice.
Right.
So what prep work do you have to do? Like when you're having an open house, do you have to go there? Are you the guy that has the broom and you sweep up and you're vacuuming before people show up? Is that happening?
That's not off limits, but oftentimes the owners take care of making their home presentable before the open house.
So you just show up, bring your flyers, and wait for people to come? Is that about it?
Not exactly.
Okay.
So
this is that. Yeah. This is that different perspective, right? There's a little more work involved than people think, right?
So there's different tiers. So a lot of people do, and it's not wrong, but it's not the best option, is they make a post the week before or a few days before saying, hey, we're going to have an open house at such and such address. And they show up at the address and they put their signs out and they get their flyers and they wait. I don't like to do that. We do all that, but then additionally what I do is I like to give myself a couple hours before the open house, and I go door to door in the neighborhood and I knock on doors and I introduce myself to people and I say, hey, we're having this open house at this time at this address, and we'd really like for you to come by. Here's a flyer with the information. If you have any questions, my contact information is on there. Feel free to shoot me a text or give me a call and reach out and I'll respond to you. And so I do that door to door, and I try to hit 50 doors, in the neighborhood if I can. So you got to give yourself time to do that.
Sure.
But you tend to have a better show rate, so you get more interest in the property. And the thing is, too, even if they don't show up, it's nice to be remembered in your community as a friendly face and to have that positive association either way. And then also, if you're working for a seller client, it's good for them to understand that you're going the extra mile to market the property. And even if these people don't show up, they now know that it's a property that's for sale. And maybe they mention it to a nephew or a cousin who happens to be looking for something.
Sure.
And so it's good to just increase awareness, even if it doesn't end up increasing the show for the open house itself. And so that's the prep work.
That makes sense too. The knocking on doors in the neighborhood, right in the area, makes sense, because a lot of times people will say, I've had people, message me and say, oh my God, we just found out this house is for sale right next to us. You should move next to us, right? You have friends, whatever, family. They're like, dude, the place next door, I just found out it's for sale. You should move in next to me, right? So someone might think, oh, you're knocking on doors in the neighborhood. They have a house. They live there. Why the hell would they buy a house, But no, it's like they might recommend that to someone else, right? Exactly. And it does happen a lot.
Yeah.
Are you setting out cookies for these people?
I have done that before.
How'd that work out?
That particular open house didn't have a great showing. And so I think one very, very lovely elderly couple came through, and I think the husband took a couple cookies on his way out, and he was happy to do that. And so that was cool.
You charge him for them?
No. We don't charge for cookies. No. That's complimentary. But yeah, there's all sorts of things you can do. I would think oftentimes you got to kind of play it by ear, you can't, if you can get indicators beforehand that there's going to be a big showing, you can do things to make it more interesting, right? To make it more engaging, have more information ready available. First of all, make sure you're informed, have more documents ready, be able to answer questions. And then it's cool to have snacks too. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Sure.
You know, obviously you want to respect a seller, and maybe they don't want crumbs all through the house, you know, of like 8 different families that walk through with their kids crumbling cookies on the carpet.
Yeah.
You got to think about these things too.
Yeah.
You're not even really supposed to have people using the bathroom at these houses because it's not their house. And so there are cases where people end up doing stuff, but you just got to roll with it.
Right.
However, you do have to remember that you can't just have a party there either, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It's a fine line you got to walk with stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just keep it professional, keep it classy, keep it minimal. We don't need to go crazy because like you said, sometimes there's not even a lot of people showing up. You know, a couple of people might show up. If I have out all the cheesburgers and cookies and everything, and nobody shows, right?
Cheeseburgers, you already went wrong.
I'm hungry. Why buy a house? Why not rent?
That's a great question. So,
let's say you're talking to a college student.
Yeah.
Would you still recommend purchase?
So here's how I would approach that. I like to approach things practically. So I'll give you an example. You might be a college student that's studying abroad, and you're going to be in such and such city for, you know, a limited and predictable amount of time, and then you're going to leave and you're planning to go somewhere else.
Buy a big house.
Makes sense to rent. Right. Makes sense to rent. And it makes sense to rent specifically when you have plans that are short term and you know that your location is going to change.
Sure.
However, overall, I think your approach with real estate should be long term, and I'll tell you why. So there's 3 things: food, clothing, and shelter. These are human necessities. We don't like to go without these things, right? You don't want to be naked, starving, and no roof over your head, right? You're probably liable to die pretty quick.
Sounds interesting.
So the idea behind that is, the question really isn't, are you going to invest in real estate? The question is whether or not you're going to get any return on your investment. So to put this gently, if you're not sleeping on your mother's couch, then you most likely pay to stay somewhere. And what that means is that you are spending money on real estate. And so you just got to ask, like, am I getting anything back for that? And so when it comes to renting, there is a 0% return on investment, and the payments are 100% interest. Now, if you think interest rates are high, think about 100% interest rate. All right? I'm just going to describe that to you.
That hurts. That hurts.
And then understand that you're going to have to find some way to afford to live under a roof your whole life. So that's why your strategy should be long term. So there may be periods, short terms throughout your life where it makes sense to rent. But overall, the access to different resources that you have while owning far outweigh those benefits of renting, which are mostly just convenience.
What about the argument that a house that I can afford is $180,000, and that house is an absolute POS? It's old. It smells weird. There's mold in the basement. The carpet is green. You know, I have to mow this lawn. My neighbors are all right next door. It's just not a good, it's an old house. All I can afford, though, is that house, or I can rent a pretty nice looking apartment and not worry about any of that.
Right.
Now what?
So here's the thing,
Do you
too.
still recommend they buy that old house?
I would recommend, if you're interested in getting the most bang for your buck, for lack of a better term, then it will always make sense to buy long term.
Sure.
However, if you have the money and you're interested in a lifestyle and you have the disposable income, do what you want.
Right.
Like, seriously, I mean that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a you know answer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the future of real estate? You know, let's say 10 years from now. What's the trajectory from your perspective? Is there going to be another 2008 housing crisis anytime soon? Is it looking like that? Or do you think real estate is still a safe bet for money?
So
Or for an investment, I should say.
Yeah, here's two things I would say about that. Is I don't want to make any predictions and be wrong, but here's something I'll say. There's no investing in something unless the price of that something can go up and down. That's the only way you can invest. Now, we know investing is a great way to create wealth for yourself. But you have to accept that in order for investing to exist, things can go down and they can go up. And that's how you actually make money on them, is when they go down and you invest and you go up. Now, real estate is a human necessity. And it's not just a human necessity like a consumable like food. It's something that you need continually. And no matter what the price of a home is, as long as you can live in it, it's useful. So it's actually functional and not just necessary, right? It's super functional. So the value of a home goes beyond its monetary value. That's the first thing I want to make a point about. The second thing is, because of that, in terms of the different things that you can invest in, because shelter is something people will always need, real estate will have value. It will always have value for that reason, because it will always be necessary.
Right.
And so someone will always be willing to pay for it. And so maybe year to year it goes down and it goes up, but it will never go to zero. And so that's why it's kind of a safe bet, and it's ultimately always a good bet if you can wait long enough. If you can wait long enough,
right.
Historically, prices, they have not gone down. They go down, but they come back up higher to new highs and they go down, right? So
sure.
Overall, it goes up, but you have to be able to be patient.
Right. And I think I've said this before plenty of times, but it's like most people who are buying houses have no interest in
investing.
No.
Right.
We're not investors. I could care less. I mean, it'd be great if the house goes up, but I'm not going to sell it when it does like it's a stock, you know? So it's like, I want the best house I can possibly get, which tends to make people overextend their budget to buy a really nice house that they probably shouldn't, right? So if someone is out there and they're doing that, which almost everyone who buys a house goes towards the top end of their budget, right? Because they want that nice house. I want the best one I can get. So let's say you buy that house, and then next month the market crashes, right? And so now your house is worth nothing, and you paid this massive price for it. Here,
negative equity, you're upside down.
Now it's worth this.
Right.
The best fix for that, or the best kind of way to, I don't know, future-proof you from losing your home would be what? Like getting a fixed rate, a 30-year fixed mortgage? Is that about all you can hope for in real estate?
I mean, depending on how you finance it.
Right.
Like, those things can matter. But here's one thing, too, is, so say you are upside down, right? Say I bought a house a year ago, and I'm living in it, and market crashed, and I'm like, man, I should probably get out of here. Say you're that guy, right? And your parents let you move back in with them. This is just a hypothetical situation.
Right.
Okay. Now, that home is still something that can be lived in. So what you do as a homeowner is you say, hey, there's people that want to rent instead of own, because the market's down right now. People aren't buying. So they want to rent instead. I can rent out my home. So I'm not saying that will work all the time, but I'm saying the fact that it can be lived in is still something that you can leverage. And I mean, you might not want to leverage it because you want to live in your home, but that's a possibility. Yeah.
I guess maybe I don't even understand. Let me ask this in a different way. if a person gets a 30-year fixed mortgage on a house, what does that mean?
A fixed rate for 30
Yeah.
years. So it means
Does that mean your payment doesn't change?
so,
What does that mean?
Yeah, it means your payment doesn't change basically, because what it does is it takes your principal amount and there's a certain amount of interest on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so each year that should stay, the absolute amount that you pay will stay the same, but as it gets amortized, meaning that you pay down the balance and the interest at the same time, more and more of what you're paying each month will go towards the balance of the loan and less towards the interest of the loan.
Right. So if your house was worth, say, $400,000, you got your loan, your price is fixed, you're making your payments. Tomorrow your house is worth $200,000. You still have your job, same job.
Mm-hmm.
You can still make your payments just fine, right? It's like you just can't sell the house and get out of this loan basically at that point. Right? So for people who are panicking and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to buy a house," and then the market crashes, right? It's like if you set up your financing properly, you should be fine, right?
Well, that's the thing, is the value of the home doesn't affect your ability to make the payments.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's my point, right?
Right.
People hear, "Oh, the market's about to crash, so I'm just not going to buy a house," right?
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, that's kind of a good strategy, because you should, if you think the market's going to crash, you should wait for that and then buy the house, right?
And that's only if it crashes, though.
Right, but you don't know when that's going to
That's the
happen.
thing.
So you could sit there and wait for 20 years and it might not crash, right? But also you could just buy a house, and if you have any kind of guarantee at your job and you're able to maintain your job and you know how to budget and all of this, and you do the math before you buy this house and you're able to make the payments, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know? You're just not going to sell that house during the time that the market's crashed, and you better keep your job. Right? So that people are scared, I guess, to get into real estate because they think the market's going to crash. And, oh, my God, now my house is worth nothing. And what, the payments are going to go crazy and I can't afford it. I have to lose my house like it's foreclosed. Like they panic about stuff like this. But it's, I don't know, maybe go talk to a banker. Right?
Yeah, you want to talk to someone in finance, a lender, because they'd be far more knowledgeable than myself. So I would check everything I've said against a credible lender.
Any other thoughts on real estate right now that we haven't really talked about that you want to share? Has there been anything in real estate that has really surprised you? Or is there something you know now about it that the general public never knows or gets to see? It's just random people buying houses. They don't get to see the inner workings. Has anything surprised you? Or is it all pretty much, because now you're working behind the scenes, right? Is it all pretty much what you thought it would be? Cold calling, having to send out 1 million emails. You're probably working 10 times harder than anybody else, right? So you're doing this at the upper levels of it all. So it's, have you gotten surprised by any of this, or is it what you expected pretty much?
You know, I used to have an idea of what a realtor was, or a real estate agent. And I was like, they don't do anything. I was like, they just show up and they just open this door.
Somebody calls them.
Someone, like, and then they buy the house, and like, I don't know how.
Pay me.
I'm like, but then you realize it's actually like, you don't take off your hat. Like, you're always a realtor. Like, it's Sunday. I got called by another agent about a property, and he had a bunch of questions for me. And this is as I'm getting back from an open house and dropping stuff off at the office and going to run errands, right? And this guy's like, hey, is that on the market? And I'm talking to him, and we're talking through. He's like, oh, well, my client this and my client that, right? And I'm like, well, my client this and my client that, right? And so it's one of those things where any moment you could be needing to work. And it's one of those things that's interesting, is because when you go to a typical job where you clock in, it's like you go in and you work. I'm always at work, and I don't just work. I have to work to create work for myself.
Right.
I have to work to actually have people do business with me. You have to get that momentum built. And so that's where you have to learn how to prospect and find out who can you actually be helping. Because people can't work with you and allow you to help them with these things if they don't know you exist.
Right.
And so you gotta go introduce yourself to people, and you've got to be a little more outgoing, and you've definitely got to do more volume with that than you probably think.
Yeah. Have you gotten better with rejection?
Oh, so, I mean, with this type of industry, like, people don't often know why things are a good idea, like why a purchase might be a good idea or why it might not be. And so you have to be honest with that. But no is the job, because people don't know if they should buy or if they should sell. And so no is the job. It's the only reason why you're employed if you're in this industry, is because people say no, and you're there to help them understand why it might be good to say yes or why it might be good to say no. And so no is the job, and rejection is, because here's the thing, anyone you don't talk to is effectively a no. And so by talking to them, you have the chance to maybe get a yes. But if you don't talk to them, no is guaranteed, always.
Right.
So you just take that and you're saying, like, I already don't have it. I already have a no from this person. What am I afraid of? Another no?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, just take a no. It's like, you've already got the no.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, boy. It's getting late.
I know, right?
I still have 2 more pages to go. Should we cut this into 2 different podcasts?
I'm fine with that, man. Thank you, everyone. This has been BTG Squad. This is part 2 with Silas Jackson and Jared Jackson. It's been a pleasure, and we'll catch you in the next one.